I'm Greg. Welcome to my channel, Midnight Oil Software, where I talk about game development using Unity and digital art. If you've been following my stream, you'll know that I've been working on a classic remake, or a remake, I should say, of the classic Moon Patrol arcade game that I'm writing as a mini game for my Ninja Eggs game, which is a 2D Angry Birds clone featuring hand-drawn art inspired by Mark Kistler, the artist and TV personality from the PBS shows Secret City and Imagination Station. In the previous stream, I added these pterodactyls that would come flying in and dropping bombs on the player. So today, what I plan to do is I want to tweak the flight pattern of the pterodactyls. You may recall that I had them come in and fly a loop and then repeat that a few times, do kind of a yo-yo loop and then fly off the screen and then drop bombs at some point during that. And then I noticed some irregularities when I was testing this after the stream that I want to fix. I also want to add some visual and audio effects to the bombs when they hit the ground. Currently, if they don't hit the buggy, if they just hit the ground, they just disappear. So I want to have them explode. And I want to implement having them create craters when they hit the ground. So if you haven't already, I'd appreciate it if you would click that like and subscribe button. And also, if you want to be notified the next time I go live or post a video, then you can click that notification bell as well. So let's just dive right in here to Unity. And the first thing I notice, I'm going to see if I can duplicate this issue. And we'll look at what these pterodactyls do when they fly into the screen. Need some Jeopardy music here. So that didn't really look quite like what I wanted. And so to make this easier to diagnose, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my buggy out of the way so that I won't have any bombs dropped on them. And then I want to disable maximize on play so I can switch back to the scene view and look at what these pterodactyls are doing. So if we go back to the scene, you can see these gizmos here. Those gizmos are from DoTween, which is the component I'm using to have them follow a path. And this one looks good. I'm happy with that one. This one isn't too bad, but it's still not exactly what I want. This one is definitely not what I want. You can see that it looks like it started here, looped around here, and then looped way up here. And then, of course, it's going to yo-yo back along that path. So that's not quite what I wanted. I want them all to do this type of loop, basically. And so I think I know what's going on there. If we go into our pterodactyl script, where I'm creating my loops, I'm clamping the y between y plus 1 times the y factor. And the y factor is controlling the direction of the loop. And I'm clamping it between y min and y max. So I'm basically saying I want it to be this plus 1, never any lower than y min, and never any greater than y max. And the problem is, I think that's actually always making it go to a maximum of y max, which is not what I want. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a property up here. So I've already got these high in the sky, left the buggy, should die properties. I want to add a property here, and I want to call it max height. And I think I want that to be the first stop minus y plus 1. And I actually want to make that a math min. I want it to be whatever's less. The y plus 1, the initial y plus 1, or y max. So it's going to take whatever's less. What I'm, this position plus 1, or whatever what my y max is. Yeah, so this will make sure that if I'm trying to increment it up beyond that, it'll clamp it there. So wherever I'm doing that clamping here, instead of using y max, I'm going to try and use max height. Go back to Unity. Those look pretty close to what I want. Let me pause it and go to the scene. Well, no, that's still not. This one's right, but these two aren't. So let's go put a breakpoint in the debugger. Okay, and we'll take a look at our path here. So our initial y is 3.2, and it looks like I'm looping down. So I'm going down to 2.2, 2, 3. So let's look at this. My y factor is -1, so I'm looping down, which means high in the sky is true. Left of buggy is false, so I'm going to scroll left. That means my x factor is -1. Okay. So starting at -3.7 to -3.2. I calculate my x distance to be a random range. So in this case, it's 1.35 times -1. So that looks right. And then I'm subtracting 1, so that's right. Going back to that start x and subtracting another 1, so that looks right. Although I didn't, so I must have min y set to 2. So I never go lower than 2. And so then when I go back, I'm not going back to exactly the same spot. Okay, let's see what the next one looks like. So starting at 4.5, going down to 3.5, 2.5, 3.5. So those all look good. So none of those look weird to me. So those loops all look good, except for this one. So I'm a little bit confused by what I'm seeing there, because the path, as I looked at it in the array, looked good to me. I mean, it's not bad, and I can definitely live with that. I'm just a little bit confused. Well, I don't want to waste too much time fiddling with that. I just thought I would tweak that. I really want to get to some of the more interesting things today. So I want to add visual and audio effects to the bombs. So how am I going to do that? If I go to my bomb prefab, I've already got an audio clip for the bomb dropping. And I've got a bomb script here. So I think what I'm going to want to do is add a serialized field and have a game object for an explosion prefab. And another one for an audio clip, explosion sound. And if you're new to my channel, I always assign these serialized fields to null because I will get compiler warnings in my console if these are unassigned. Even though they're being assigned through the inspector, Unity and Visual Studio don't seem to be smart enough to know that, and I get warnings, and I just want to prevent those warnings from displaying. So when I collide here, I want to spawn the explosion prefab. Let's see, object pooler dot spawn explosion prefab. I want to spawn it at my current location. So I'm going to cache my transform. So that will spawn an explosion effect. And I want to play a sound. So if we go back into Unity and make sure I've got that bomb prefab selected. Where's my bomb script on there? I was pretty sure I had a script on there. Oh, now I have two of them. Was it there and I just didn't see it? Okay, so explosion prefab. Let's go to my scrolling explosion that I created in the last stream. And I like that mine explosion. Mine explode. I think that will sound good. Let's see what that looks like. Those look good. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that bomb dropping sound is a little bit loud. So I'm going to turn that down a little bit. I'm not really sure I noticed much of a difference. I think that's pretty good. Okay, so go back to my agenda here. I've added the visual and audio effects to the bomb. So now I want to have the bombs create craters when they hit the ground. So thinking about how I want to do this, I've got this terrain manager here. And I have this method that I'm calling whenever one of those terrain tiles goes out of scope to tell it when I want it to spawn a new one. So when this guy goes off the screen and collides with a waypoint, I notify the terrain manager to spawn new terrain, then I deactivate myself. And if there were any hazards attached to this guy, I get rid of them. So I think what I want to do is I want to create a new script to add to the terrain, only to normal terrain. And I want to have that know when it has a bomb dropped on it. And I want it to notify the terrain manager to create a crater at that location. So let me go back into Unity, and I want to look at the bomb, because if I'm going to handle the collision of the bomb on that terrain tile, I think enemy is a good, I think I can leave it on the enemy layer. So I can look for a collision from the enemy. I think that'll work. So I'm going to go into my scripts, Egg Patrol, create a C# script, and I'm going to call this bombable terrain. I don't know if that's a good name. It's destructible terrain. Okay. Actually, I'm going to do what I did in one of the other classes. I'm going to have a serialized field. It's going to be a list. Can I do ints? Or do they need to be strings? List of strings. I wonder if I could use enums in there. I'm going to look at that later. I'm going to create a list of strings destroyed by if my contains, oops, so if the thing that collided with us is something that can destroy us, and I think I'm going to have an init method on this. Well, the terrain manager, when it spawns terrain, it calls a knit on it. Why am I not doing that here? Oh, I'm calling spawn terrain from here. Destructible terrain. Go back into Unity, let that refresh things. Make sure I don't have any compiler errors. All right. Why is it not seeing that? Is it not public? It's public. It's in this namespace. I should move that up into the normal minigames namespace. Yeah. Gonna have to create a method called a knit. Okay. Go up into my Unity here. I'm going to move this up a folder. Okay. All right, so what do I want to do? Where's my create crater method? It should have created. Oh, here we go. Interesting choice where it chose to put it. So right now, all I want to do is log this to make sure that this stuff is wired up correctly. And I only want to do this. Well, this is only going to resolve to non-null if the component has that component on it. So I'm going to go back into my prefab for terrain, normal terrain. And I'm going to add component destructible terrain. And destroyed by enemy. Ha! That worked nicely. Now I'm going to move my buggy back, and I'm going to have the terrain manager spawn craters, because I want to make sure if a bomb drops on a crater that we don't get that message. I don't think we should. Now I also want to make sure it doesn't throw an exception. Oops. I gotta not get bombed though. Alright, let me move that buggy back. Okay, they didn't hit a crater. Well, they hit me though. Oh well, I'm sure if an error occurs, I'll notice it. So what do I want to do? How do I want to create a crater? So in the terrain manager, in create crater, so this guy's going to have a position. So I'm going to want to call spawn terrain type crater at the destructible terrain's transform position, and it cannot spawn a hazard. And then I'm going to want to despawn that guy. Actually, do I need to clean anything up from that guy first? I mean, what if he has a hazard on him? I'm gonna have this guy handle despawning himself. Can I do that? So this guy has a hazard container. go to my destructible terrain. Create crater. Actually, I can handle multiple things in a collision. So I have multiple components handle this collision. So I think what I want to do, well, so this guy's going to create the crater. Well, I'm just trying to figure out how to architect this. What I could do is I could say hazard container equals get component in children hazard container remove hazard child. Oh. And then I can despawn this guy. I will turn off my regular crater production. I'm going to move this buggy way back here. Let's see what happens. It worked, but I did something weird over there. That's not good. Well, I know exactly why that happened. The original terrain it's still, that terrain should have collided with the waypoint. And told it to spawn the new terrain. Let me go back to my normal terrain prefab and disable that component, the destructible terrain component. Why can't I disable that? Let me just remove that component for now. I just want to make sure I didn't accidentally delete something. Okay, so that's still working. I got my waypoint here. Where did I put that waypoint? Right there. Okay, so that's still there. Let's put that component back on my normal terrain. And that guy should still collide. He should still have scrolling terrain, and he should still... Oh, I'm deactivating him. Well, no, I'm deactivating him, but I still have this guy. All right, let me just see if I can figure out what's going on with this destructible terrain. All right. So I have this new crater clone. He's got scrolling terrain on him. And it should collide with that. It's no longer spawning any new terrain, it looks like. Well, that's really interesting. So none of these guys seem to be colliding with this and triggering the spawn new terrain method. Even these guys don't seem to be. I just want to have one pterodactyl. Keep this simple. Well, it gets caught up. So maybe I just need to call spawn new terrain immediately. Nope. What on earth? Oh, I bet it has to do with the spawn terrain method setting the last terrain spawn. That's the problem. I think I can get rid of that. So it thought the last terrain spawn was here. And so it was actually spawning new terrain in the wrong place until it finally got caught up to the edge. Well, I thought that was the problem. Oh, I forgot to make use of that new parameter. So when I create crater and I call spawn terrain, let's see. So I have the terrain type, spawn position, kin spawn hazard, set last terrain. So that's false. Let's give that a shot. That looks good, except I'm not sure I like where the crater appeared. Because the bomb's not necessarily going to fall in the middle of a piece of terrain. But that actually worked. So it is 12:41. I guess, what was the next thing on my agenda here? Create enemy spawner. So I guess I could get started on that. Oh, by the way, I do know something I'm going to have to address in the future. There's a problem, a potential problem. In fact, let me turn on the crater and hazard creation here. And I'll put it fairly low percentage. Unless I do something about the create crater logic, it's possible it could create craters, 2 or 3 craters right next to each other, which would be impassable for the buggy. So I'm going to have to put in some logic to limit. Oops. Well, like there's a perfect example. That cannot be allowed to happen. So one of the things I'm going to do in a future video, tweaking game balance, tweak crater spawning frequency, and hazard and enemy spawning frequency. These are things I want to do to make sure that it's fair, that there's never a situation that the player could not, no matter how good they are, overcome. But first, let's create an empty game object. I'm going to call this enemy spawner. I'm going to move that up. Well, come on, Greg. Let me just move it up here. All right. So enemy spawner, he's going to want a script. Refactor, move the namespace, egg patrol. Okay, so he's going to want to have a prefab for the enemy to spawn. Probably want to have a float for the percentage it can spawn an enemy. Maybe we should have a minimum delay. So say at least 2 seconds before it spawns an enemy. And maybe a maximum of 10 seconds. And then I want to have maybe spawn a minimum of 1. And maybe 5. All right. So in on enable, so when I have, I don't need that. What doesn't it like about these? Oh, I don't, yeah. Enemy spawn delay. Okay. So in on enable, I will set enemy spawn delay to be equal to Unity engine random range enemy spawn delay min enemy spawn delay max. And I'm actually going to make that a expression body method property. So in update, I will decrement enemy spawn delay. Actually subtract time.delta time. And then I want to have if should spawn enemy spawn enemies. Spawn enemies. Actually, this right now is just going to be as simple as enemy spawn delay is less than or equal to 0. Oh, and we're playing. So, as always, I need to have a minigame level controller reference in on awake or awake. Level controller equals, you know, I have, when I do the refactoring video, I have a neat trick I'm going to use for using a singleton instantiation pattern, so I don't have to do what I'm about to do over and over again in all these scripts. But first of all, I want to say find object of type, minigame level controller, true. And then if that's not null, I want to get component minigame level controller. And then in should spawn enemies, level controller is playing and our delay is less than or equal to 0. All right. So what do I want to do in spawn enemies? Well, how many enemies do I want to spawn? That's exclusive. So make that +1. I think that's all I need to do. So let's go into Unity and set our enemy prefab. And you know what? Right now we only have one enemy type, but who's to say I'm not going to add more enemy types? And that is exclusive. So from 0 to whatever the count -1 is. So that should work. And so, actually, this is going to be random every single time I call it. And I always want to spawn whatever enemies I'm spawning, I want to spawn them all of the same type. So I will assign that outside that loop. All right, so let's go into Unity. Go to my enemy spawner game object. Drag in this enemy spawner script. And then for our prefabs here, find my pterodactyl. And I'll just drag that in there. And the rest of these should all be good. And then while I'm in here, create a prefab from that. All right. Delete these pterodactyls. And let's play. I'm going to need to move my buggy forward. Whoa, that was not good. I think I need to reset the delay after I spawn my enemies. Okay, so spawn enemies. Yeah. Ooh. I might want to do something where I don't spawn new enemies if there's already enemies out there. Yeah. So since this is no longer going to be just a simple condition, I'm going to have to add some kind of a base class or an interface. But for now, I'm just going to look for pterodactyl. Or just count. So if there's no enemies, so first of all, if we're not playing or if we haven't met our delay, return false. Otherwise, if there are still enemies alive, return false. Otherwise, if there's no enemies, we'll return true. I think that should keep more enemies from being spawned until all the enemies that were already spawned are gone. Let me move my buggy into the scene where I can see it. I gotta make that delay greater. But that worked. That definitely worked. So if I go to my enemy spawner and set the minimum delay to be 5 seconds and maybe the maximum to be 30 or something like that. Maybe I'm going to make the minimum 10. And I'm going to make this 3. It's a beautiful thing about exposing these in the inspectors. I can tweak these settings until I get them like I like them without having to go in and change code. Definitely got to prevent that scenario from happening. All right, I think that's enough for this stream. It's definitely getting toward the end of my lunch break, so I need to wrap up now. But I really appreciate you all tuning in. If you haven't already, please click that like and subscribe button and click that notification bell so that you can be notified the next time I go live or the next time I post a video. And if you have any suggestions or questions or requests, please drop a comment and I'll do my best to respond to them as soon as I can. So thanks so much for watching and good luck on your game development journey.